The Assyrian heartland lay deep within Mesopotamia, nourished by the mighty Tigris River. Its cities rose like monuments to conquest, fortified with massive walls and adorned with carvings celebrating military triumphs. Among them stood the legendary city of Nineveh, seat of kings who believed themselves chosen by the gods to dominate the world. And perhaps no king embodied that belief more completely than Shalmaneser III. To his people, he was the hammer of the gods. To his enemies, he was a living catastrophe. Every spring, when the winter rains faded and the roads hardened beneath the sun, Shalmaneser marched to war. Year after year, campaign after campaign, his armies crossed mountains, rivers, and deserts, crushing resistance wherever they found it. This was not warfare for survival. This was expansion without limit. The Assyrian army itself was unlike anything many kingdoms had ever seen. It was not a temporary militia gathered during emergencies. It was a professional war machine. Disciplined infantry marched in formation beneath towering shields. Archers unleashed deadly volleys with terrifying precision. Siege engineers dragged massive battering rams across hostile lands, capable of smashing city gates that once seemed invincible. And then there were the chariots, fast, deadly, and psychologically devastating. Assyrian chariots were the tanks of the ancient world. Teams of horses thundered across the battlefield carrying elite warriors armed with bows and spears. To face them in open terrain was to stare directly into destruction. Kingdom after kingdom fell before this machine. Tribute poured into Assyria. Gold, silver, livestock, timber, slaves. Entire peoples were swallowed by the empire. Those who resisted often vanished from history entirely. Then, in 853 BCE, Shalmaneser turned his attention westward, toward the Levant. These lands, stretching through modern-day Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and Jordan, were rich beyond imagination. Fertile valleys produced grain and wine. Coastal ports controlled lucrative Mediterranean trade. Caravan routes carried spices, precious metals, and luxury goods from distant civilizations. To Assyria, the Levant was not merely valuable, it was essential. Conquer it, and the road to Egypt would lie open. But the Levant was fragmented. Small kingdoms constantly competed against one another. Alliances shifted like desert sand. Old rivalries burned deep. City-states distrusted neighboring kings as much as foreign invaders. Ordinarily, this division made conquest easy. One kingdom falls, another submits, a third pays tribute to avoid destruction. That was how empires expanded. But this time, something extraordinary happened. As news spread of the Assyrian advance, panic swept through the region. Messengers rode across dusty roads carrying terrifying reports of approaching armies. Villages whispered stories of Assyrian cruelty. Kings stared at maps, knowing their walls alone would not save them. One by one, rulers realized a horrifying truth. Alone, they were doomed. But together, perhaps they had a chance. From Damascus emerged one of the key figures of this alliance, King Hadadezer, ruler of Aram Damascus. Powerful, experienced, and determined, he understood the danger better than anyone. Envoys were dispatched across the Levant, to Hamath, to Phoenician ports, to desert tribes, and most importantly, to the kingdom of Israel. There, King Ahab listened carefully. History often remembers Ahab through religious narratives and political controversies, but ancient records reveal something else entirely. A ruler presiding over one of the wealthiest and most militarily powerful states in the region. Under the Omride dynasty, Israel had become prosperous through trade, construction, and military expansion. Fortified cities rose across the kingdom. Commerce flourished. Armies grew stronger. And when the coalition gathered its forces, Ahab revealed the true scale of Israel's power. The evidence comes from an extraordinary artifact known today as the Qarqar monolith, an Assyrian inscription commissioned by Shalmaneser himself. Ironically, the king's own boast provides historians with one of the clearest pictures of the alliance assembled against him. The inscription lists 12 kings united against Assyria. 12 former rivals standing shoulder to shoulder against a common enemy. Hadadezer of Damascus contributed over 1,000 chariots and tens of thousands of infantry. Irhulani of Hamath brought hundreds more. Forces arrived from Phoenician cities, Arabian tribes, and distant regions across the Levant. Even camel riders joined the coalition. But among all these contributions, one detail stunned historians for centuries. According to the Assyrian record, King Ahab of Israel supplied 2,000 chariots. 2,000. Think about that. for a moment. Not soldiers, not spearmen, chariots, the most advanced and expensive military technology of the age. Maintaining even a few hundred chariots required immense wealth. Horses had to be bred and trained. Craftsmen needed timber, bronze fittings, leather, wheels, weapons, and armor. Crews had to practice relentlessly to maneuver effectively in battle. To field 2,000 chariots meant Israel possessed extraordinary economic and military infrastructure. This was not a weak kingdom surviving in the shadow of larger powers. This was a regional superpower. Ahab's contribution alone rivaled the elite forces of entire empires, and suddenly, the coming battle transformed from a simple invasion into something far greater. This would not be another helpless kingdom crushed beneath Assyrian boots. This would be a collision between civilizations. The coalition gathered near the city of Qarqar along the Orontes River. There, beneath the blazing Near Eastern sun, one of the largest armies the region had ever seen assembled for war. Thousands upon thousands of infantry crowded the plains. Archers prepared arrows by the bundle. Horsemen checked reins and saddles. Priests offered sacrifices to their gods, praying for victory. And everywhere chariots lined the horizon like an ocean of bronze and wood. The tension must have been unbearable. Men knew what Assyria represented. Entire cities had vanished before its armies. Families faced extermination if the coalition failed. There would be no retreat into safety, no mercy from the empire, only resistance or destruction. Then came the Assyrians, disciplined, terrifying, relentless. Their banners appeared first in the distance. Then came the marching infantry, then the cavalry, then the roar of chariot wheels rolling across the earth like thunder. The Battle of Qarqar had begun. The clash that followed was chaos on a scale difficult to imagine. Bronze crashed against iron, arrows darkened the sky, spears splintered. War cries echoed across the plains as thousands of soldiers collided in brutal hand-to-hand combat. The ground became slick with blood and churned into mud beneath countless feet and hooves. And at the center of it all were the chariots. Ancient warfare had never seen anything quite like a massed chariot engagement. These machines were fast, devastating, and horrifying to infantry caught in the open. Imagine the scene. Ahab's enormous chariot force surging forward in formation, horses racing at terrifying speed, wheels hammering against the earth, archers firing while drivers maneuvered through chaos. Then from the opposite side, the elite Assyrian chariots charged to meet them. The collision must have been apocalyptic. Wood shattered. Men were thrown violently to the ground. Horses screamed in terror. Clouds of dust swallowed entire sections of the battlefield, while infantry struggled desperately beneath the storm unfolding around them. This was not a clean, orderly battle. It was slaughter, an endless grinding struggle where survival depended on endurance as much as skill. Hour after hour, the fighting raged. The coalition fought with desperation born from defending their homelands. The Assyrians fought with cold professionalism, executing the will of their king with ruthless efficiency. Neither side could afford to break, because once panic spread, everything would collapse. Eventually, as evening approached and exhaustion consumed the battlefield, the fighting began to fade. And then came the mystery. According to Shalmaneser's inscriptions, the battle was a glorious Assyrian victory. He claimed to have killed 14,000 enemy soldiers. He described rivers clogged with bodies. He boasted of total triumph. At first glance, it sounds convincing, but history often hides its secrets between the lines. Because after this supposed great victory, something strange happened. Shalmaneser did not conquer Damascus. He did not destroy Israel. He did not occupy the Levant. Instead, he went home. The mighty Assyrian king turned his army around and marched back to Mesopotamia. Even more surprising, he would not campaign successfully in the region again for years. Why? If Qarqar had truly been the crushing victory he described, the road south should have been open. Assyria should have rolled through the Levant uncontested. But that never happened. The coalition kingdoms survived. Their kings remained on their thrones. Their independence endured. And that tells us something extraordinary. The Battle of Qarqar may not have been an outright coalition victory, but it was almost certainly not an Assyrian victory either. Most historians today believe the battle ended in a strategic stalemate, one so costly and difficult that even the Assyrian war machine could not continue its advance. And in many ways, That stalemate was a triumph for the coalition, because their goal was never to conquer Assyria. It was simply to survive, and they did. For the first time in years, the seemingly unstoppable empire had been checked. The myth of Assyrian invincibility cracked. Qarqar proved that unity could resist even the greatest military power of the age. It demonstrated that divided kingdoms, when facing annihilation, could set aside rivalries long enough to stand together. And perhaps that is why the battle still resonates nearly 3,000 years later. Not because one side utterly destroyed the other, but because ordinary political logic was shattered. Enemies became allies, fear became determination, and smaller nations discovered that cooperation could halt even the mightiest empire. The Battle of Qarqar was not merely a clash of armies, it was a clash of futures. Had the coalition collapsed, Assyria may have swept across the Levant decades earlier, reshaping the history of the Near East entirely. Instead, the kingdoms bought themselves precious time, years of independence, years to rebuild, years to hope. Of course, history would eventually take its course. Assyria would rise again. Future kings would return westward with renewed fury. Some coalition kingdoms would later fall beneath Assyrian domination after all. But for one extraordinary moment in 853 BCE, the giant stumbled, and the world noticed. Even today, the echoes of Qarqar remain buried beneath layers of time, hidden among ancient ruins and weathered inscriptions. Yet the story still speaks to us across the centuries. It reminds us that history is rarely as simple as victory monuments claim. That power is never truly invincible, and that sometimes the courage to stand together can alter the course of civilization itself. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. And if you have sure ideas, we'd love to hear from you.